Hello, colleagues and friends. This is Garth, and today's episode is in honor of our friend and colleague, Jerry Rudmann, who poured himself into the lives of students and of psychology education and of service to his colleagues and to his discipline. I've been watching emails go back and forth between people who knew Jerry, who had worked with him, and the sentiment is the same. Beautiful person, so positive, so giving, such a model for how we should do our work, and it is a huge loss to our community. I had the opportunity to interview Jerry for episode number 155 of PsychSessions, and that interview took place at the end of summer of 2022, nearly 2 years ago. Jerry's career spanned 6 decades, and he devoted his life to undergraduate education in psychology. He started many initiatives, he was a part of many APA projects, and maybe his most significant contribution and legacy will be through Psi Beta, where he served as executive director. At the end of this episode, you will hear from Sumo Learning, Macmillan Learning, and the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. We are always grateful for their support. Jerry had many adoring colleagues and students, and it is our pleasure to present his story and his voice here on PsychSessions, conversations about teaching and stuff. The recorded conversation will begin in just a few moments. We invite you to take that time to remember Jerry. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Psych Sessions, and it is my pleasure to get to interview someone who has been long on the Psych Sessions hit list, and I cornered him at WPA in spring and said, we're going to do this, and now it's the end of summer and beginning of fall, and we did it. So this is Dr. Jerry Rudmann from Irvine Valley Community College in Irvine, California. And I think you've been teaching there for a few years, Jerry. Is that right?
Yeah, I started in about 79, and I was one of the founding faculty members. And I was the only psych member. So I started the psych department there. Interesting.
I teach at the newest community college in Washington State. And they have a similar story where it started as a very, very small faculty, obviously. So even today, we're 20 years in, there are 2 full-time psychology faculty members here at Cascadia. How big is your department now?
We have 4 full-time people and about 6 or 8 adjuncts. I'm one of them because I'm retired from full-time teaching.
Okay.
What's interesting about all the full-timers is they all started at a community college.
Oh, really?
Including me. Yeah, including me.
Started as a student or as a faculty member?
Oh, no. Their career pathway.
Okay, their career pathway. Okay, yeah. So, Jerry, we first of all have to... Most of our audience is going to recognize your name because of your associations with many different things. So we'll probably get into some of them, but let's list a couple of them right off the bat. BEA stuff. You've been involved with the American Psychological Association on a couple big projects. What were those ones?
Well, the 2 biggest ones are the guidelines. I was on the team that did the first one, Guidelines 1, and then Guidelines 2, and then the most recent update, which is still going through approval, Guidelines 3. I was on the Introductory Psychology Initiative project. I was one of the people involved in that. Before that, I was in community college working group, which was sort of a precursor to PTAC, which was a precursor now to CABE.
Yes.
So I go back a ways.
Yeah. And did you say you were on the first guidelines as well?
Yes.
Okay. So did
Yeah.
you skip two or were you on two?
I was on that as
Oh,
well.
okay. Okay. Sorry,
In
I missed
fact,
that.
Jane Helen and I think are the only two that have survived, not found a way out.
Yeah, Jerry, I do feel like I've just seen you. Everything I've been involved in my up to my mid career point here, you've been at every turn. We definitely have a few things to learn, and I want to ask you about kind of longevity and how you've seen these things change, not only at APA but at the community college. But that's not all, folks. Psi Beta has been a passion of yours. Are you still currently executive director?
Yes, I began serving as executive director in 2005, and I tried to retire about 3 years ago, and the person who came in it didn't work out, so I took it back. So yeah, I am still the executive director.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, what are we missing here? What else have you given your time to in kind of throughout your career? What are the big markers for you?
Well, I would say, I started as a advisor of a Psi Beta chapter in 1992, and I had already been teaching. As I said, I started in like 1979, and I would receive these promotional materials in the mail at my office, and I would just throw them in the trash can and about Psi Beta. And, why would anybody want to do that? And then I attended the APA conference in San Francisco in around 1992, and I had nothing on my schedule at that time at the conference, but I saw that there was a Psi Beta information session. So I walked in there and sat down, and I saw all these students most of them were from Cerritos College. They brought their entire chapter. And a lot of them were underrepresented minority students. And they were just really sharp. And that motivated me to start a chapter. And I came back, started the chapter in 1992. And that was probably one of the most important professional development moves I've ever made. And I was sad, I would look back at that and I thought, well, I wish I wouldn't have waited so long, because what Psi Beta did is start networking me with people from across the country. I eventually became the Western Regional Vice President, National President, and by that time I was being invited to BEA Educational Affairs events and a thing called P3, which took place at James Madison University. And that's how I heard about guidelines that were being started, and I got onto that group task force because they wanted to have some community college representation. I was the only representative from a community college at that time. So the changes, you ask about the changes, I think there's a lot more involvement professionally of community college teachers now in national organizations. One of the reasons is Psi Beta and the Bureau of Educational Affairs and Society for Teaching of Psychology. However, I feel that for the most part, it's still a minority of professors, especially when you think of people that are teaching at really remote locations, or they're in small departments, or I've even known large departments where everybody just kind of like the stereotype of the commuter student. The professor comes in, teaches, and leaves, but they don't connect with the professional organizations, which is a real drawback for their professional effectiveness, because there's just so many resources that are available now for community college and university professors. It's just, to not take advantage of those and be involved is not a good choice, I think.
Yeah. It seems that I don't know. I feel like the way that I found my way into kind of these national relationships and opportunities and kind of getting in touch with these resources was through the community that I was a part of at my first job. And so the other professors there were aware of STP and were involved in APA. And so it's something you observe and you think, oh, this is how it works. But I could see that if you were a one-person department in a smaller place, or if there were people around you not participating in this way or not knowledgeable about these resources, that it would just never occur to you. And I think that's one of the problems that we have is how do we get all this good stuff out to all these teachers of psychology? I think Eric Landrum, he suggested, and I don't know if there's data on this. I'm sure there is if he suggested it, but there's that there's about 40,000, psychology instructors in the United States, and we are not seeing those kinds of numbers, right? So, yeah,
right,
yeah. To your point,
it's when we have a hiring, faculty hiring process to hire a new faculty person. One of the questions I always like to ask as part of the group interview that we do for candidates is, how do you stay current in the field? And, the question I would like to hear is, well, I subscribe to teaching of psychology. I'm active in STP or something like that.
Yeah.
Or at least look at the material that they put on Facebook. One candidate one time said, well, I asked that question, how do you stay current in the field? And the answer was, I stay about a chapter ahead of the students in the textbook. And I thought, oh, that's not a good answer.
No, listeners, just make sure that you don't use that answer when you're interviewing for a tenure track position.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you've seen you've seen a few things over the decades. So let's start at your college. Actually, if you don't mind, Jerry, I'm so aware of what you've done in the last 10 years that I would like to go back maybe and just hear your story about how you got involved in teaching psychology in the first place. And maybe we even back up to as a child, where did you grow up and what was school and education like to you and to your family?
Right. Well, I came from I had a brother. That was my only sibling. My parents, neither one of them went to college. My dad dropped out of high school, and my mother had to work to help her parents out, so she didn't even go to high school. They were both very intelligent, but not high school, or didn't even go to high school. So when I graduated from high school, I didn't know what to do. And there was a community college near us called Mount San Antonio, which is it's in Southern California near Pomona. And I went over there, and my interest at that time was electronics, because I had started messing around reading electronic books, and I took an electronic course in high school. I had a couple of part-time jobs where I worked as a technician. So I got into a career and technical program that ended with an associate degree. And that's a 2-year program, and I liked it very much. It was mostly guys that had just gotten out of the Navy and people like that. There were no female students at that time. So my counselor said, okay, Jerry, you need to take at least one general ed class before you leave here. And so I took psychology, and because I think that's what a lot of people do when they start at college. They take psych because they think, they either have questions about it or they think it's going to be easy. Who knows what they're thinking. So I took psychology, and I found it absolutely fascinating. There were also girls in the class, which I found was a real improvement over what I had been doing. And I liked the class so much. I remember I didn't study for it, but I would take the exams because it wasn't my major. I would take exams and go home and then look up the answers because, oh, that's really an interesting question. Defense mechanisms, rationalization, projection. I'd look up the answers in the textbook after the test. So I managed to get a C in there. But the thing is I now have the fever, psychology, I changed. And then I started thinking, if I major in psychology, I could be the first person in my family ever to go to college and get a degree. And so that's what happened. So I started taking classes and I transferred, went to Cal State Fullerton. I met my wife in a statistics class, of all things. And that was the best thing I probably got out of that course. So then I got my bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, and was able to get a job because I had been doing electronic technician part-time work, working my way through school. I got a job at Rockwell International working in human factors. And I knew some of the other people that I had gone to school with. They were real high achieving people, but they didn't have that electronic background, which really wasn't very much. I mean, I sat there and just did some tests and stuff. I didn't even know what I was doing, but that was enough. That was enough to qualify me. So I began working on human factors. I did that for 7 years. And then the electronics or the grants and all that were being given to the different aerospace companies started to fade out in California and go to Texas. So layouts started occurring, layoffs. Yeah. So what I did is I started teaching part-time at El Camino College and finding out what it was like to teach psychology.
Now, at this point, you've got your graduate degree already?
Yes.
Okay. Your master's degree. Okay. So let me go back because I'm fascinated by by how the content of introductory psychology kind of grabbed you. Was it only the content? Was the instructor memorable? Was there anything about that person?
Yeah, he was actually an adjunct professor, Mr. Thomas, and in the introductory psych class, he was very personable. I remember one time he was standing behind the podium and one of the students said, "Mr. Thomas, tell everybody what happened." And he goes, he says, "Well, I dressed in the dark this morning and I came to work and I had two different shoes on, two different color of shoes." But he was very passionate about the field. I really enjoyed learning about the defense mechanisms that began to really make sense. It helped me understand some of my relatives that had questionable behavior. I remember too that one time he showed a movie, and it was about child development. We were studying that, and there were these two little kids fighting, and both of them were just angry and they were hitting each other. And he stopped the movie and he said, "Why are you all laughing?" He said, "Don't you see the tragedy here? These kids are trying to hurt one another and you're laughing." And so we had a big discussion about why did that happen and why does that bring out laughter, some kind of a defensive thing, I suppose. The other thing he had done is he had interviewed some psychopaths, and he talked about what it was like to talk to psychopaths and the kinds of things. He said he was interviewing one once, and he said, "Well, that's odd that you would say that." And the guy says, "Yes, because I have no personality. I am basically amoral." So, I mean, it was just a real thought-provoking kind of a class.
That's really interesting. It everything we know about active learning being a superior way of educating. It sounds like before maybe that research was out there and the general public knew about it, this was the kind of intuitive way that he taught his classes.
Yes.
Yeah, and that it resonated. Yeah,
it was in the days of stand and deliver, but he engaged us with discussion. Yeah. And in small groups and stuff. So, yeah. So
do you think the content would have still grabbed you if he wasn't there? It would have been if it was stand and deliver.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so because he had discussions and he showed movies, but the thing is he just had a real interest in us and in the subject matter, And it seems weird when you think about it that somebody could take an introductory psych class and not like it, but I think it's possible to do a bad job teaching it.
Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it? Yeah. And so, okay, so then we fast forward. You meet your wife in a stats class. You end up at Rockwell International, which I think you kind of alluded to it, but that's a manufacturing institution, right?
Aerospace, yes.
Aerospace.
They were involved in sending the men to the moon, weapons of mass destruction, guidance systems for jets in the Vietnam War. The experiments that we did were things like bringing in college students and having them sit in jet mock-ups of jet airplanes and then having different display panels, with the idea being trying to reduce misreading of key indicators on the display panel and to minimize pilot error and to be more accurate when hitting targets with bombs. So it was very, the aerospace companies had to have human factors people working for them. That was part of the contracts. Yeah.
So what part of that were you doing? Were you interviewing folks then, or were you designing?
I worked in, it was an interesting thing. I was not in the cockpit layout and all of that kind of thing. What I was doing was going into manufacturing areas and where they had people sitting on assembly lines, and the other employees pretty much were in quality assurance. So you had people putting circuit boards together and another group of people inspecting them, because the consequence for having an error on a circuit board, a part missing or a part oriented the wrong way or something like that, could mean that a missile or anything, a satellite might fail. So it was very, very tight inspection and tight assembly. So my job was to go in, and I have to tell you, I was new to all of this, and I had no idea what I was doing. But I ended up, my pattern was I would go around and I would talk to people who were in the assembly area or the inspection area, and because they did this 8 hours a day, they put things together and all that. And I would try to find ways that could make their job more efficient and less air prone. And I had to assure them that I wasn't trying to, eliminate their job. I was just trying to make them an even more effective employee. And so I ended up doing some things like I designed some things that people could use who assemble parts that would make their job much more fast and easier to use, and would have somebody else in the company, of course, design these and pilot test them. So one of the things I did was, I think the thing that strikes, kind of overlapped with psychology the most was in the inspection area. We had people inspecting circuit boards trying to locate any kind of defects, and they would have an image, like a large photograph in color of a perfectly made circuit board, and then they would see the real thing and would look it over and try to find, just assure that it was okay, that there were no parts missing, broken, bad solder points, anything like that. So what I did is I used apparent movement. The research on apparent movement, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but if you superimpose two images and at about a rate of 15 per second, it looks like the part's moving. It looks like the image is moving. It's the same thing that's used when you make these little comic book things. You can draw pictures and then flip through the book and it looks like it's moving. It's the whole concept behind neon lights in Las Vegas. So long story short, I applied that. This was my master's thesis, by the way. I applied that concept, that perceptual concept, to inspection. We had a microscope made that had 2 sets of optics, just one set of eyepieces, but one set of optics would look at a perfectly made circuit board, and the other one would look at one that was just coming off the line, assembly line. We would superimpose the images and then alternatively light each circuit board up one after the other. So what it looked like if you were looking in the eyepieces is you were just looking at a circuit board, but if there was a piece missing, it would blink. Or if it was in the wrong orientation, it would move left to right or do something like that. So we did a mock-up of that and ran that with projectors that superimpose an image on a backlighted screen. Did a mock-up, brought in students from all over the place, from Cal State Fullerton mostly, and it showed that, obviously the apparent movement setup greatly increased accuracy and reduced error rate. And then when I left the company, they were just buying one of these from a microscope company. They were actually had a microscope made that could do those things. So that was my biggest thing that I had the most fun. I think that on that job, the thing that made me the happiest is if I would see something that had been implemented in a factory that I had something to do with, designing it or discovering that would help people. That was put me on cloud 9.
Well, it's so interesting to hear this, and here's where we're probably going to encounter all these skills that you developed over all these experiences you've had over your career. And I know that you've been involved with like the skillful psychologist work, and how much you value and talk about skills now. But these experiences, one of the things I see is that you are solving problems and collaborating with others. It's almost like this team thing that gives you a sense of accomplishment. And you are one of the team players that I've been observing now for 15 years of my career. You like to work with other people on projects where you accomplish these great things. Seems like to me. I don't know. Am I off?
Right. Oh, no, you're absolutely right. There have been times where I've been asked to lead a team or something like that. And I say, you know what? I don't think I'm that skilled. My leadership skills are not great, but I am a really good team player. Let me do that. And I think, all of those skills that we did with the 21st century workplace skills are really valuable. I learned a lot from that project. I don't know if you wanted to segue into that or not.
Well, let's go, and we'll come back to kind of the timeline. So let's talk about it.
Well, we began the group I was with, Karen Naffel and Drew Appleby and several others.
I've got them: Jason Young, Jay Van Kirk, Stacy Spencer, Bernardo Caducci.
Bernie Carducci.
Bernie Caducci, yes. Paul Hedich and Aaron Richmond.
Right.
Yeah.
So it started out, and we actually started looking at job. Well, we already knew the research was showing that employers feel there's a sizable gap between what the college graduates come out with their degree and what they want in a recent grad. There's a skills gap there. Eric Landrum has talked about that for a long time. I just saw something this morning. Another study came out. They're saying the same thing, that about only 20% of graduates have the skill set that they would like to see, that employers would like to see. So that was where we started with this 21st century project. And then we started looking at job announcements in which people with a BA in psychology could apply. They may be jobs in which they would look for sociology or other majors or general, liberal arts majors as well, but psychology showed up. And I wasn't part of the group that they did a huge analysis of all of those job descriptions, and it kind of started showing that there were clusters. And they ended up being 5 clusters of skills, and under those there were more specific skills, and I think there's 17 of them. And those are things that we made a nice little table of that and started wondering, where do students pick these up? And do they know that those are things that employers want? Because this was employer driven, but also ran that through a psychology perspective and said, people that get the BA in psychology, at least they have the opportunity to learn all 17 of those skills. Whether they do that and whether they can articulate that to an employer, we're not sure. So that's where we started developing supplementary materials and things like that. First of all, I developed a checklist that students could rate themselves. Like, where are you right now, in your second year as a major? Where are you in terms of those 17 skills? And we tried to operationalize them so it was a little easier for the students to understand that. And so I think that's still developing. A lot of those are still developing. I know that Stacy Spencer and Karen Naffel and a few others have developed a skills-based resume and a cover letter that emphasizes skills. And now I have students sometimes ask me to look at their letter that they're applying to it for a job or for grad school. And I'll go through and look at it and I'll say, I know you pretty well, and what you're saying here flows well, but it's more of a philosophical statement. You need to point out the skills that you have, because those are the things that they want. So this is sorry, my cat's kind of running around.
No, that's fine. Mine does the same thing. Your cat's cute, by the way. Yeah. Okay. So in case folks have not seen this, just Google the Skillful Psychology Student, APA. There is this wonderful one-page PDF that has these 5 areas: cognitive, communication, personal, social, technological. And I love these 17 sub areas. I think it's so great to say to students at any point in their journey, look at these and use these to assess yourself and to advertise yourself. Even if you're not going for a psychology job, and you're going to apply to be a barista to get yourself through community college, these are going to work for you. And there are things that you learn here that you can apply. And some of these things you already have to some extent. So yeah, it's a really nice way. It's very empowering for my students to start to see these things in themselves. Nobody ever taught me that, for example, right?
Right.
So.
Right. I remember, Garth, I was at Cal State Fullerton as a senior, and I was in Psych-I, and the Psych-I advisor brought in a school psychologist. And this lady came and spoke on school psychology as a career and what kind of degree you need. And of course, psych majors are right in line for that. How much it paid. That was the first time I got any kind of information about careers in psychology. They just didn't have it available at that time. I might mention that another thrust that's come out of this skillful psychology work is getting instructors to think more about, putting skills in their syllabi and bringing that up in the courses they teach, especially statistics and research methods. It's just loaded with skills that students are gaining. And I think a lot of them don't realize how valuable they are. And
yeah, I agree.
Being able to take a set, design a little survey and collect data and put it into a table or a PowerPoint that communicates that information to lay people, that's probably of the former students that I've interviewed about 10 for some career course that I teach. That comes up continually. What they learn in the research methods and the statistics courses, no matter where they're working, they're applying that information. But are they able to articulate that, to their employer? And that's something we still need to teach, I think.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Some of that communication stuff probably is supposed to happen in other disciplines like communication or something like where students learn these skills. But I really think we have to we have to do some of that for our psych majors or students who are applying to psych programs at a community college or whatever, even for personal statements or for application letters. These are really important. You mentioned research methods and statistics. I couldn't agree more. I've said this before, but there's a textbook I use for research methods. I've used it for quite a while. And one of the things that I like it for a number of reasons. I don't think any research methods textbook is perfect, but it's the Goodwin and Goodwin book. And one of the things I loved about that book is that at the end of it, there is about 2 or 3 pages of what you summarizing what you learned through this course. Now, of course, as an instructor, I can tell students all that, but my students don't want to read that syllabus on the first day that has, the 30 things that they've learned. But I tell my students after they've been through, the hell of research methods, once they've been through it all and they're bought in and they've worked so hard and they feel this sense of accomplishment, it's a celebration really to look at what they have learned and to practice how they would explain that to somebody. And it's a nice moment at the end of the term.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of related to this too is I'm still looking at things that come out. Well, Drew Appleby is like right on top of this stuff. He's scouring stuff that's appearing in different venues now and sends it out to everybody who was on that task force. And the term soft skills is used a lot, kind of loosely. But if you look at what a lot of people, if you go and just Google it, you'll see, soft skills are things, they overlap quite a bit with the psych skills. And you would think so, because I think, soft skills is not a good term because it makes it sound, it devalues the value of it. But what soft skills are obviously are things like communication and teamwork and being able to collaborate with others. And employers expect, if you're a psych major, well, you've got that. You should be coming in with that. But I'm not sure we always teach it. We kind of think it just comes in from osmosis from getting your degree. But
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I guess I'm looking at this list and the soft skills, which again, I don't think anybody who probably worked on this document loves that term, which is probably why you didn't call them soft skills.
Right.
But, I guess some of maybe the technological skills are more probably considered the hard skills. But yeah, a lot of it is relational. It's communicative. And the cognitive skills that are going on there. Have we gotten any feedback from employers about this document?
I know that it's being picked up and referenced in a lot of articles. It does show up. But that's a really good question. And that might be a good question for the lady that works for the Center for Workforce Development.
Karen Stam.
Yeah, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that our committee, we kind of communicate on sort of a friendly basis, but not formally any longer. But I do think that this is such an important area that BEA may want to reconstitute part 2 of this. Okay, now that we have these, how can we use them and get the information out and the sort of supplemental resources that can be used? Are these being put into career resource places on campuses? Are students seeing them? It's a really good question. What is the impact of this? I do think that probably should be part of the assessment of students when to see if they're transfer ready or their bachelor's degree ready. Is they should be aware of 3.0 out learning outcomes and the 17 skills.
Yep. Did this grow out of CABE? This initiative?
I think CABE was the one that was behind it. Yeah, they just they wanted to. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that's because we had several CABE people on there.
Right.
It was an initiative, and CABE's great, and that's one major area where community college faculty are much better represented now. We have as many people on the CABE task force or group as there are university professors, and I think it's made a big difference in how we are seen at community colleges, and how we respect our university colleagues and peers.
Yeah. Well, let's jump there. We will get back to the timeline, but let's jump in. You've seen at APA pre-PTAC, and then you saw PTAC, and then you saw CABE come. Can you just talk about, I think you did refer to it early on, but at the community college level, it's becoming there's increasingly more opportunity for community college folks to get involved nationally through APA, either as a large organization or through Division II STP. But what were your early days like, or what did you kind of perceive early on?
Well, it kind of felt like there were only about 3 or 4 of us that were anyway involved professionally. Now, there were some organizations that focused on teaching. I can't remember that they've been disbanded, but there were some teaching organizations that would sponsor speakers and symposia at the regionals, for example. But then PTAC started doing that, and now I think we have Psi Beta, Psi Chi, PTAC is sponsoring things, STP is sponsoring things, and I'm probably leaving 1 or 2 organizations out, but it's teachers are much more involved. Those who teach psychology at a university or community college are much more involved in the conferences now. I think, though, we still have the issue that the majority of community college psychology teachers are not professionally involved, and they don't know that they don't know, and that they need that. And so one thing I'm interested in doing through Psi Beta, I've been talking with the Psi Beta board of directors, and they are behind this, and we would start a thing called a community college psychology network. And basically it would be free to join, or maybe very, very low cost. And it would be a place that we would have our own website, Community College Psychology Network website, and it would feature all of the different organizations like BEA, STP, the regionals. And that way we could try to recruit through Psi Beta and then going outside of Psi Beta, because Psi Beta only has 160 chapters, but there's over 1,100 community colleges in the country, and a lot of those community colleges are multi-campus districts. So we've just touched the surface, but we're probably the largest group professionally of psychology teachers are Psi Beta advisors. So we're very serious about developing this community college psychology network, and it wouldn't be there to compete with any of the existing organizations, but just to facilitate knowledge of them and bringing people together. And maybe we would sponsor some webinars or something like that. And we'd also like to have students. Community college students need a place to go too. Yeah. They're kind of like, if you start at a university, you're your psych degree, that's one thing. I think you have resources that reach you more readily, career-wise and so on, and getting into labs to do research and so on. But when you start at a community college, you're pretty much isolated as a student for most community colleges. And they could benefit from having a place that says, you know what, there's all kinds of ways you can become student members of these different psychology organizations. There's all of the divisions in APA. There's so many different ways they can get involved now rather than waiting till they transfer or think about it, So that's what we're thinking. Showcasing this thing. I'm working on the website, and maybe it'll come out in a year or so. We'll see how that helps.
I love two ideas about that. It's reaching out to community college teachers who need that support, and it's reaching out to kind of maybe non-traditional students or less prepared college students who we tend to find probably more community colleges who need that support. And so, and who are not aware of those resources. So, how does Psi Beta kind of do everything that it's doing and then start to pick up these different charges as well?
Well, we have the people that we have a region, 5 regions. And we mirror PsychSessions structure. And each region has a vice president. And then we have current president, past president, and president-elect. So we have 9 or 10 people on our board of directors. And we have a conference call every month. And all of them are outliers. They're people that are involved in all kinds of things. We have Todd Joseph, for example, who's been in CABE. We've had Catherine Westcott was our president a few years ago. She was a CABE member. A lot of them are involved in the regionals in helping develop programming for students and poster sessions and things like that. So there's a synergy there that's amazing.
Yeah.
And I just had a conference call with the group last week. They want to do a virtual teaching conference in November. And we're looking into different platforms. And we just had an advisor retreat for the first time ever. It was like a virtual thing of anyone who advises can come together. 30 people showed up with 2 days notice, and they want more. So there's a synergy building there that's really great. It's difficult, however, to get some community colleges kind of resist the idea of starting a Psi Beta chapter because they see it either as elitist or who in the world has time, Well, the thing is, the benefit of it, I've experienced that. First off, you start working. There's such a range of ability and commitment among students at a community college. But when you have a Psi Beta chapter, you start working with the ones who are the most interested, and they have to qualify by GPA anyway. And so they're sharp students. They transfer at a high rate, and they do well. We hear back from them, and we have former students are now in doctorate programs and so on. They do quite well, and some go right into the workplace. I've had several students that have gone to UCLA or Berkeley. They graduate and they go right into the workplace, and they do pretty well. So the synergy is there. But the thing is, from a standpoint of being a teacher, I now have students in my classes that I know pretty well, that I know by their name, and they're really good role models.
Yeah.
And so that changes the nature of the courses that I teach. It increases the quality and the satisfaction for me. Plus, these students are doing service projects and bringing in speakers and things that all the other students who are not even in Psi Beta can come and gain from, learn something from. So it's a win-win. In most colleges, it's been a really good experience, and
How much
like I
time
said before, I wish I had started before. I was teaching for over 10 years before I even got involved professionally in Psi Beta. Now, that was the other thing, is that was my entry point. Psi Beta was my entry point into professional psychology.
Yeah.
I never would have known. I didn't even know what WPA was, the Western Psych Association. I'd never even heard of it until I got into Psi Beta, and they asked me, you should come and bring students. So, and then that's how I got to know people at the APA. And I mean, I would sit there when I was on the 1.0 group, making, writing up the what do we want our students to know when they graduate in a BA in psychology? And I'm sitting in the APA building thinking to myself, how in the world did I do this? How did I get here? I was a dropout kind of student in high school. So I've been very blessed, and psychology is the reason for it.
Yeah, man, that's a great reminder. Yeah, I think we all, if we are involved at this level, we all have the story of that one thing. For me, it was a phone call from Jane Hallinan, who I didn't know. And I didn't know of. That's how disconnected I was from the community. Yeah. I didn't know the Rudmans and the Hallinans and the whoever else. But yeah, it was a single phone call and saying yes to something, and there starts the ride. So for folks who are listening, who are considering Psi Beta, on the Psi Beta website, you can apply as an advisor to start a new chapter. How many hours should a new advisor plan to be giving to Psi Beta on a regular basis if they want to, do right by their students and the organization?
Well, if you get the right students, getting started and all that, I would say it's a couple of hours a week. You usually have a meeting every couple of weeks, but you get officers that work on the agenda and the minutes and service projects. We have a research committee in our Psi Beta chapter, and so I would actually start meeting with the students on Friday afternoons that were doing research projects. Now, there was no course for that at the time. There is now. We actually made a faculty mentored research course as a consequence of working with the Psi Beta students. But I would be meeting with them on Friday. I remember we had an adjunct professor who really was interested in getting a full-time position, and she was really excellent. Was teaching. Solki Kim was her name, and she does have a full-time job now at Palomar College.
Right.
But I remember she said, "Can I come to some of your Psi Beta meetings?" I said, "Oh yeah, all the faculty come. All of our full-timers come to all the meetings, and the part-timers are invited." And so she heard about I was meeting with students on Friday afternoon, and she says, can I come and help on that? And I said, sure, because basically what we have is like a university model. We have 2 or 3 students working on one project and another couple of students working on another project. And we just meet. It's no lecture, none of that stuff. We just meet and we talk about how would you design the study? How are we going to get this through the IRB? When you get the data, we would all get together. People would watch one another's research groups analyze the data, and then they eventually present it at a conference. Now, we started a journal. Psi Beta started a student research journal, and some of our students are publishing now. So the thing is, Solki Kim, getting back to this story, this adjunct, she came and she said, she told me after the meeting, I can't believe this. You have a room full of students on a Friday afternoon. This campus is dead. Everybody else is gone. And these students are really engaged. She said, this is amazing. So I said, yeah, well, that's just, it's just evolved that way. And it's a great experience. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's great. It's a great opportunity to give students. Hey, let's jump back into your timeline. So when your job kind of dried up because they laid people off and moved to, I think you said Texas. Did you say Texas?
Yes. Lyndon Johnson was president. All the aerospace went there.
Right. And at that point, Is this is your first teaching gig at that point that you take on?
Yes, I got a job teaching at El Camino College, and I remember the guy, Art Ellis, not the same guy that's for rational emotive therapy, but had a similar name. And what I did is I sent postcards out to all the community colleges I could drive to. We have a lot of community colleges in California, so that was easy to do. And mostly I got back, okay, you're in our file. We'll let you know if we need anybody. But I didn't hear anything back. And then suddenly I got this call from El Camino College, which is in Torrance. And I live in Anaheim, so that's about a 45-minute drive. So I went down there, and this guy, he's the dean of social sciences, and he's looking for a part-time psych teacher. And he says, well, tell me something. You've never even taught before. You weren't a TA. You were nothing. Why should I hire you? And I says, well, yeah, I got to start somewhere. I couldn't think of anything else to say. And I said, I really do admire the people I had as teachers, and I admire the community college system. I went through the community college system. I owe a lot to it. So he decided to take a chance and let me have a class. I have to tell you, I was terrible. There were not the teaching resources and all of that come with the textbooks in those days.
Yeah.
You got Hilgard and Bauer or something like that to teach. So I would spend my weekend, reading through the book and putting together notes I had from when I was a student. So eventually I did that for a while, and then one day I got a call. I was still working in aerospace full time, so I was teaching night classes. And I got a call from the school and said, one of our full-time professors broke his leg while going to the bathroom, and he can't teach. And all I can think of is he tripped over something, but that's what they said. Can you take 3 of his evening classes? So I'm driving in El Camino College 3 nights a week, teaching full-time, and that was the experience. I have to tell you, when I first thought about teaching at a community college, I said, who in the world would want to do something like that? Teaching that same course over and over and over. How boring, how dumb. Community college students, where they're not going anywhere. Well, the experience of teaching changed that a lot. You and I know, Garth, and people who teach know that no class is the same. They all have different personalities. Some of them click well, and they think that you can walk on water, you can go across the hall to your next class, and they don't like you that much. They just don't even like the subject matter. But it's such, especially if you get into the science of teaching and learning and trying different teaching approaches. I remember when I was at El Camino, I felt that I was only doing stand and deliver and then showing old movies. I mean, that's all I do to do. And I wasn't happy with it, and I didn't know what was wrong. And I had read an article in Psychology Today. It was the man on the moon experience thing, where you land on the moon and you have to figure out what items are important and which aren't, and you rank them. I tried that in a class. I made it into a little class exercise, and I got them in groups, and the groups just took off. They were so ready to do something besides listening to me talk to them and show overheads, because we didn't have PowerPoints even. So you show overheads. Of course. I mean, it was a lot of work to teach, but the students weren't really getting activated. And when I saw that, man, I was on cloud 9. I thought, this is the key. We got to get the students doing things. My gosh.
Get them engaged. Yeah.
So then I realized, okay, this would be better than working in aerospace and facing a possible layoff every week. And so I started applying, and I was fortunate to get the job at Saddleback College. And then they started Irvine Valley College about 2 years later, and I applied for that and got it. So I ended up being like one of 12 people. We had one mathematician, one business person, one psychologist, one sociologist, and so on. And I could do anything I wanted. So I started, I was able to hire really good people, and write the curriculum, and it was a terrific thing.
What did you learn about being with an institution as it grew from day one?
Well, they all have their own problems, and they all have their strengths.
Yeah.
Different people would come in. We would get a dean sometimes that was a problem, a micromanager. Sometimes we'd get a president like that was super micromanaging. And we don't have that situation now. Everything's really great. But we went through some really dark days. There was one time where the president was put in place by a corrupt process, and no one liked him, and he started getting rid of all of our really talented administrators. They all left, and they all got jobs, really good jobs. But I mean, things were really dark. Yeah. However, the psych department just said, look, things are terrible, but we just need to keep plugging away. As long as we have the students and we have the choice of how to teach them and which courses we teach and how to do our schedules, we're fine. So the students really never knew that we were having a rough time. The Senate meetings were very depressing because we were not respected in the role of faculty. We were being, talked about in a negative way to the board by the college president. But those days came and went. But one thing I've noticed is, because I've known people who teach at community colleges all across the country, we meet for different purposes. Every once in a while, someone will bring up, boy, we sure got the dean from hell at our college. And that opens up Pandora's box. I mean, everyone starts sharing, oh, yes, nothing. You should see what we had once, So I think we all go through that. But I think being psychologists, we're better able to tolerate those nuances and those bad times and stay with the primary mission, which is our students, and serving them well.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that when the administration is not going well, you can kind of focus on the department. And I think probably some people are listening and thinking, okay, well, what if the department is dysfunctional or it's not going well? Well, then at that point, I think you focus in on your students or subparts of the department, somewhere to put your positive energy so that, you don't go down with the ship, at least not mentally down with the ship.
That's exactly right. And the thing about that too is you may not have colleagues that you get along with. I mean, that may be the result of just different circumstances. But if you get involved nationally and in some of the organizations like STP and things like that, you will have friends that are like you, that are motivated, they're committed, and you'll have them, and they'll be all over the country. And you're a good example of that. We've benefited so much by knowing the Jane Hallandens and the Eric Landrums and the different people like that. Bernie Carducci's, they're fabulous people. Maybe we're all outliers, I don't know, but there's room for more. Yeah. And so that's what I had. At one time, the only other person teaching psychology was a history teacher that had a little bit of counseling background, and they had to put him somewhere, and they put him into psych. And he wasn't a real committed teacher. And so I just started making my connections with other psychologists across the nation. And it was very rewarding, especially now with Zoom. I mean, we can talk to our friends face to face all the time now.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking of that, now that the pandemic has allowed for us to meet face to face, where am I going to see you upcoming? Are you planning to do some traveling this fall or this year?
Well, I'm teaching several classes. I'll be presenting on the teaching thing that Psi Beta is going to sponsor. I will attend WPA. I love WPA, and Psi Beta will be at APA again,
Yep.
but that's about it. I know that I've been in the Northwest Network thing that you did. I was involved in that last year, and I just haven't been involved lately in that kind of thing. But
sure. Yeah. Well, we'd love to have you in. We'll be running that in April this year, but I know you got a lot of stuff going on. You're doing a lot. Hey, Jerry. So what have we missed, if anything? I think we covered kind of all the major pieces of things that you have been involved with that I know about, but is there any kind of major pieces that we skipped over? I know that it's hard to squeeze a 40-year career into 60 minutes.
Well, I don't think so. I'm just thinking, I give a shameless plug to Psi Beta again.
Of course.
One thing there's a couple of things that Psi Beta has been instrumental in, and one of them is Psi Alpha, which is an honor society for high school students. Mm-hmm. And that's starting to take hold. It is separating out from Psi Beta, so it'll be a separate honor society, but we want to do some collaboration kind of things. We think, what a better place to help community colleges recruit high caliber students than from your local high schools that have Psi Alpha chapters. And we might be able to convince some of those students to come to the community college first, rather than going straight into the university and spending all that money and sitting in large class lecture rooms.
Yeah.
So that's one thing.
I'm on I'm a faculty advisor, I think, for that, for Psi Alpha. I think that's what we're called, some sort of faculty advisor group. So I'm excited about what's coming up.
Yeah. And then the other thing, Garth, is that we do a national research project every year. Psi Beta sponsors one, and all the chapters are responsible for going out and getting participants and getting IRB approval at their campus. And this year, the topics, we've done things like shyness and factors related to shyness. We've done a study on how connected are you to your college, especially with COVID. We've done one study was on addiction to social media, people that overuse it. This year, we're doing psychological myths and misconceptions. And it just turns out that that's apparently, I don't know if it's CABE or STP has got a big emphasis on that now. And so we're going to actually do a baseline study and find out what's the perspective of community college students, psych majors and non-majors and so on. How many of these beliefs do they believe, and how sure are they that they're true? And we're going to try an intervention. We're going to actually do an intervention in which some students are exposed to a critical thinking exercise first, with the idea that maybe when they answer the psych myths, they'll be less likely to endorse them. Have no idea if it's going to work, but we're going to give it a try. And I think this is an area that's rich. I think it's an area that's rich for development and not exploitation, but teaching more of this to our students. The last thing we want is them leaving our introductory psych classroom still not thinking that psychology is a major, or is a science, I should say, or believing some of these same myths that are some of the leading ones that they shouldn't believe, even, and they leave introductory psych with those same myths. So that we're gonna start focusing more on that and the source of those myths in the next year.
Fantastic. So you're still, going back to your first job out of graduate school, you're still finding errors. You're still creating devices to find errors, which brings the whole thing full circle. Jerry, thank you for all of your service, for paving the way for community college instructors, for all that you've done for Psi Beta and APA. I've really enjoyed being on 3.0 with you, on IPI with you, and it's nice to finally sit down and kind of hear your story. And I got to say, the things that you probably didn't think we'd talk about today, like your first job, and those things are just so fascinating. And so thanks for sharing all that stuff.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, when I look back, I really feel blessed. Things have just gone so well for me, and being involved in the professional level with people like you and all that group, it's just been enormously satisfying. It's been fun.
Well, hopefully we'll have a few more interactions here in some committees or whatever. I don't know what the future holds or how quickly you're trying to get all the way out. But I have a feeling with Psi Beta that you are not. We're not gonna see you completely unplugged from the community yet.
No, I don't think so. I hope not.
All right.
Okay.
Well, Jerry, thanks for your time today, and it's really nice to see you.
Okay, thank you, Garth. Been nice to see you too. Take care.
The PsychSessions podcast is sponsored by STP. That is the Society for the Teaching of Psychology. That's APA Division 2. You can find them at teachpsych.org. The views or product endorsements expressed do not represent the views, support, or endorsements of STP. PsychSessions is so grateful to have STP as a long-term supporter. Hi folks, this is Garth, and I want to tell you about an intro psych book from Sumo Learning. That's SOOMO. The book is called Psychology in the Real World by author Jennifer Harper. Psychology in the Real World encourages students learning along the way by providing frequent formative assessments all aligned with APA's themes and learning outcomes from the Intro Psych Initiative, all tagged so you can track their progress on those outcomes. It's got LMS integration and auto grading and supplements like slides and test questions and notes, and it's affordable at only $50. So check it out. Go to sumolearning.com. That's SOOMO learning.com and get a preview of psychology in the real world. We know you want to reach every student in your course, to help every student individually succeed. But how do you find out what each student wants and needs? Macmillan Learning's Achieve for Psychology offers a solution. Ask them. Achieve puts goal setting and reflection surveys in each course, where students share their aspirations, thoughts, and concerns about what they are trying to learn. Their responses help you tailor lessons and assignments and addresses both individual and class-wide needs. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psychsessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.